Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Reggae Anti-War and Peace Songs. This event is taking place as part of the Leicester Human Rights Arts and Film Festival. The festival started 9 years ago. We're now in our 9th consecutive year. And the aim of the festival is to draw attention to human rights issues at home and abroad. For tonight's panel, we've got still absolutely brilliant speakers who will have conversations with us on reggae and reggae peace songs, reggae anti-war songs. The reason why we scheduled this theme for the festival is that although we know that musicians engage with current issues and also with systemic issues, and they've done so for as long as they've been musicians, there's very little consciousness that reggae also speaks to issues around peace and war. To help us shift that and to help us look at what reggae music says about peace and war, we've got an absolutely brilliant panel of speakers. How we are going to proceed is each speaker will introduce themselves and then just speak to the topic. After all the panelists have spoken, we'll have a discussion among the panelists first, and then we will have a Q&A session, including anyone who is present who would like to ask questions, make comments, observations, suggestions. So without more from me, I hand over to Sumeet Sharma, our first speaker.
Thank you, Ambrose. And thanks to the Film Festival, Alex and Colin for being here, and the participants today. So just quick introduction on who I am, and then maybe I could dig into sort of what brought me here. Well, it was Ambrose, but specifically the historical background of what brought me here. So my name's Sumeet Sharma. I'm from New York. I live in New York. I'm calling in from Brooklyn right now, actually. And professionally, I work for a criminal justice nonprofit in New York that centers around prison reform in New York State. That is sort of my professional background. But I was really excited when Ambrose reached out, about this panel. And about to talk about reggae, war, and peace songs, and how I came to it was through a class that I took and through an activity that I had been heavily involved in through my academic career, and still a bit through my current work, which is debate, and specifically at the University of Vermont in an academic setting. And through debate, I was introduced to a professor who actually taught a class, the rhetoric of reggae music at the University of Vermont. And that professor was also my coach for 5 years. He thought, he has since passed on, but his name was Alfred Snyder, and he had a long history of not as much trying to win an argument in a debate, as much as trying to teach, to go to different places in the world and teach debate as an activity, as a path for people to think critically, think about human rights, think about the way discourse is used. He was able to, travel to Iraq, Palestine, Kosovo, Serbia, different parts of the world. Ambrose, when I received the invitation, and I did write a paper in relation to that class, I thought of what a wonderful way to be able to, think about him after so many years. The paper itself comes from an interest that I had and something I noticed while I was listening to reggae music. It's about the intersection between reggae songs and nuclear weapons and nuclear war. when listening. Steel Pulse is one of my favorite artists. But taking a look at a lot of the imagery of their album covers, taking a look at or listening to their music, you'll find them speak about nuclear war a lot, and especially maybe zooming out a little bit. And the album that's coming to mind is Earth Crisis, and taking a look at that image, and sort of the image of the album has the Pope John Paul on it, and a Soviet flag and an American flag and like a nuclear explosion and so on, and raised the question. Is that why does a nuclear war and the effects of nuclear war come up so often in reggae music outside of Steel Pulse? Like there's on a Peter Tosh album cover, it comes up frequently, and so in that paper, I did some research and found out that and just thinking that nuclear weapons, more than the physical harm, are used as a tool and means to silence people in different ways. And then on a second level, that the way that nuclear weapons have been used have been in testing for the vast majority of cases. And that testing often happens to people people who live in communities that are indigenous to an area, or are disaffected in the power structure in one way or another. If you take a look at the map of nuclear radiation and the effects of it in the United States, you'll find that nuclear radiation from these weapons testing is much higher in areas that are indigenous, and likewise worldwide, where there was nuclear testing on the Bikini Islands and Polynesia, and likewise in Africa, and in places that kind of represent a different power structure. So I guess the conclusion of that paper was that, if it's not really a stretch, because when it comes to war and peace, the people who are impacted are the people who are sometimes who are the farthest away from the people who are making those decisions about use of weapons and power and so on. And I really appreciated the chance to write about that and think about that in the context of that class I took, and the context of debate and rhetoric and how it's used in different ways. So, thanks to Ambrose for bringing us together today. And just want to share a little bit on that background and why I'm here today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Ambrose, and thanks to the wonderful people in Leicester for commemorating Human Rights Day. I must say that in many years of being involved with human rights, teaching human rights, I haven't been in a community setting exploring questions of human rights together, and I think that's where it belongs. So I'm very grateful and I have deep gratitude for the work that you're doing, for keeping the community together, and for bringing light to reggae as a means of bringing peace and highlighting war. And thanks, Sumeet, for getting us going with nuclear war, which is a threat to our very existence. That if the fact that we, rather than spend resources on food and clothing and shelter for all kinds of people who lack those things, nations choose to invest in weapons of mass destruction. And highlighting the work of Peter Tosh and others suggest that this is nothing new, that we've been at this and we've been thinking about this. My name is Alex Otieno. I teach at Arcadia University. I'm an associate professor of sociology. I also serve as an associate dean for the College of Arts and Sciences. I am originally from Kenya, so my introduction to reggae happened when I was about 10 years old. In Kenya, they used to have a radio station, the only radio station at the time, the Kenya Broadcasting. It was back then, it was called the Voice of Kenya. And on Saturdays at 9 o'clock in the morning, they would play reggae. And so I would make sure I was around the radio and listen to it. later on, the government banned the reggae because they deemed that reggae was a dangerous thing, which is an interesting thing because I think it was enlightening young people and disturbing the power structures. So now there are many radio stations that play reggae. They're actually radio stations that play reggae exclusively all day, 24/7. So the world has changed. As Ambrose indicated, I've explored reggae myself previously. So I've written about, and I'm actually writing something right now about reggae. Previously, I looked at reggae and human rights, its role in human rights discourse in Africa, how both Jamaican and international reggae artists from outside Africa have commented on situations in Africa using reggae, and also how reggae artists like Tiken Jah Fakoly and Alpha Blondy, among others, have also used reggae to speak to human rights issues in Africa. Today, I'm going to focus a little bit on some events that are closer to you in England or Britain, and some musicians working there, and a few Jamaican musicians, and then use both peace and war together. I will use both peace and war together because I think of peace, especially positive peace, which is not just the absence of war, but people flourishing and thriving being an important thing. So I'll begin with that and draw attention to Luciano's Imagine, the song Imagine, where he talks and see, let's see if I can find the lyrics of it. Because Luciano brings up, forces us to imagine, imagine living in a world where there is no war. Oh, no. Imagine that everyone you see knows what we are living for. Oh, what a wonderful world it would be, a world of love and peace. When no evil can abide, only righteousness and creed. And we can do it if we only believe. He goes on, but I wanted to start with that to sort of highlight the reality of the fact that as we deal with war, there's always the flip side is always peace. And centering peace for me is important, even as we today know the events happening in many places in the world. We can name Ukraine, but you could also go to Ethiopia and the Congo in Africa and other parts of the world. And there are also places where they don't have war, but there are civil rights abuses and police abuse of citizens. And so that brings me to Linton Kwesi Johnson, who is one of my all-time favorite musicians. So rather than sing, he tends to recite the poetry. And I think Dread, Beat, and Blood is one that sort of dates back to the 1980s. So it seems very ancient. But as a youngster, I was particularly impressed by him highlighting the war that was being meted against Black people in the United Kingdom by the police. And that's something that continues to be a problem and kind of speaks to Sumeet's interest in reforming criminal justice, that we need a reformed criminal justice where police abuse, so there might not be a war, but the people who are experiencing the abuse and the violations of human rights are literally living in war situation because they can't live their lives in peace and unmolested by the power structure and the powers that be. And the other one I wanted to highlight, which also takes us back in time, was the Mutabaruka, the poet Mutabaruka, who uses one of his songs that have really captured my thinking earlier on, was on Invasion of Angola, where he talks about they invade Angola again, my friends, they invade Angola again. And so sort of showing this, how the South African regime and the apartheid regime, which now seems like a figment of the past, was perpetrating injustices against Black people in Southern Africa and preventing sort of freedom from flourishing in that region of the world. So there is a long history of reggae musicians, both highlighting human rights abuses on the one hand, and highlighting the possibility of peace, justice, love, and unity as something that we could pursue as a common humanity. The other one that I wanted to highlight briefly is this song by Culture, that I think the title of the song is Peace, Love, and Harmony, that kind of speaks to the importance of building peaceful communities and working collaboratively and ceasing war. So calling us as a common humanity to work toward peace, love, and harmony. And because I know we'll have time to talk together, I'm going to sort of keep my comments brief, but I also wanted to go back to how reggae musicians have used the music as a tool to get us to think about events from the past. So Bob Marley's use of music, for instance, to highlight the speech that Haile Selassie gave, Emperor Haile Selassie gave at the United Nations until, the title of that song is War. But it speaks about until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is war. And so it speaks to the idea that we should strive for, that the way to get to peace essentially is by respecting all rights. And as we know, people of color historically, and I know other people as well, who are non-people of color, people who are poor, have also been subjugated, but people of color have been victims of the racist systems that have been erected through enslavement and colonialism and imperialism, and to some extent even globalization today. So while global systems allow us to be in with one another, me here in Glenside in Pennsylvania, and Sumeet in London, and you in Leicester, and so that's a good flow. But within this flow, there are still discriminatory practices that we need to keep bringing up and highlighting if we are to have a peaceful society in a peaceful globe. So I will end there and hope that we can engage with each other in conversation later. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's interesting, listening to you. That was also part of my experience with reggae, where when I was growing up, it was there, and it was present. It was on the radio all the time. And it also formed, part of my own consciousness to a certain extent. It formed part of my own, worldview. Like questions around, why are we here? What are we as people? What are we there for? But that I'm sharing, I'm not supposed to be speaking. I'll hand over to Colin.
Yeah. Good evening, yeah, thank you for inviting me to this. My name's Colin Brown. I'm a member of an organization called Reggae Fraternity UK. I've been a member of that organization since 2015. But going back even further, my heritage, my parents are Jamaican. So I've gone through the various, well, I'll tell you my age. I was born in 1960, and I was born in the United Kingdom. So just going through the Scar phase and whatever was coming over from Jamaica. My dad was a record. He loved his music. So, and I was one of the first to always go and play the records that my dad would bring into the home. Back in those days, you had to get special permission to use the radio, the record player, because needles tended to break easy in those days, and no parent liked to know that you've broken their needle and they can't play their music. So, playing the music was, you got special permission. Yeah, so my background obviously is Jamaican heritage, and so reggae has been key in my life. It's interesting, Alex is saying about radio. You know, I don't know how many hours you had access to reggae on the radio, but that was a similar experience in the United Kingdom. We got 1 or 2 hours when, you know, the specialist shows started up. It was literally, you know, everyone crowding round, and, you know, with the old cassette tape, trying to record it, because that's going to last you for the week. That show is going to last you for the week. With the old pausing of the tape recorder and trying to edit out the DJ and his speaking. So yeah, those you've taken me back. So coming to the topic. So I guess the first track that that sort of pricked my attention, and I thought, what is this all about? What is this song? And it was Jimmy Cliff, Vietnam. I had no idea what was going on in Vietnam. I think it came out in '69, so I was like the age 9. All I know is it had an excellent hook. So I grew up singing Vietnam, Vietnam, and not only when getting older did I start to, what is this Vietnam that he's singing about? You know, and my journey's continued in terms of looking back, hearing music first, not quite understanding what they were talking about, but that was like the newspaper or the carrier that I would tune into, what the lyrics of those artists, and maybe not getting it at that point, but retrospectively, years down the line, start analyzing, well, I was listening to the beat and it had a nice melody, but there was this serious message, you know. So this whole exercise here, looking back at this particular time with this panel, has done the same again. I've had to look back and examine some of the lyrics and try to understand what the message, and be in awe of the writers, to be quite frank, that they've used, that they're sitting down and they're thinking about these things that are going on around them, and they feel the need to tell us, you know, either they don't think it's getting through via the politicians or the normal news media, but they're conveying these messages to us. So as I said, the first one was Vietnam. That as I got older and got into school, and then heard about the Vietnam War, and listened to those lyrics, you know, someone from the war writing a letter to a friend, and ultimately there's a message to a mother that her son is dead and died in the war, and only subtly Jimmy Cliff mentions, you know, talks things about peace, you know, no more war and peace in that particular track. I went to college, from school I went to college, and I don't know if it's college people have a certain mindset where you're curious. I think in order to go to study, you have to be open-minded, you have to be receptive, and you want deeper messages. So you tend to listen to the roots. You know, I was a sound system man, so obviously I've got the whole dance thing and everything to make you dance and happy. But on the academic side and going through to college and whatever, so I'm listening to a broader range than maybe your average person that's perhaps not going down the academic route. So the root side and whatever. So then I had the burning spear. The way I would listen to music back in the day, and I'm not sure if you tell me if I'm going over the time, but I used to listen to music in a darkened room, and these are the sort of roots albums. So I was listening to Burning Spear, Bob Marley, Third World. Those are the kind of groups, and I'd be listening in a darkened room. And I think the point of that was I didn't have then the distractions. I could just actually hear and listen to the lyrics and the vibrations and whatever, but actually not be distracted by anything that was in the room. And actually any friend that came to visit me at the time would actually literally would just say hello, and they come in, the light's gone off and we're listening. That was how. That's why, you know, looking back on how I enjoyed my music. But again, if we talk about Burning Spear, the Man in the Hills album, and in that album, We Don't Want No More War. You know, you go, you know, so you're getting all these messages. So, you know, they're never singing about one thing, but you can, as you go back retrospectively and you say, okay, yes, that war track, we don't, and the way Burning Spear conveys it, he conveys his words with a certain, you can feel like a pain coming through. So that's what I connect with, the feeling of artists that really bring or sing from the soul. And that's what I get from Burning Spear. With Bob Marley, you mentioned the track War. Now, from that particular track there, what and there's some words in there. The words that you pick out, they're with me every day from that track. Until the color of a man's skin is no more significance than the color of his eyes, there will be war. Those words are with me every day. Since listening to that track from back as a youngster, and going through life, and every so often these phrases, they pop up in my mind, and I, you know, the power of music and the way it's sung or whatever, but those lyrics, you know, those words, yeah. In preparing for this, you showed us some album covers and things like that. Another artist that I was into is Mikey Dread. Big. He used to be a radio presenter, producer. He basically could do everything. Made some dub albums as well, but he did an album called World War III. And on that, again, you look at the imagery on that tank and whatever and war, and there's a couple of tracks on there. Obviously, the title track, World War III, and talking about how different cultures, and you know, we should respect each other and that type of thing. You know, I live here, and this is my culture. You live there. You know, we should be able to respect each other's cultures. And yes, I'm a dread. You might be a bald head, and this respect. But also there's another track on there, Break Down the Walls, and he talks about breaking down the walls. And again, those, listening to those albums and doing it in the dark. Certainly that one was later on. I wasn't living at home with the World War III, but just those, a lot of these lyrics I carry around with me, and I actually recite them. And people sometimes, you know, I do a radio show as well, and sometimes during my radio show, some of these words that I've listened to from songs and that have stayed with me, they're very powerful words and messages, and I might recite them or just mention them in conversation, because these are powerful words to me. But I guess I thank you for this opportunity, because it's given me another reason to look back at lyrics, as because I've enjoyed the music, but looking back at lyrics, I did this a couple of years ago when I got into the abolition of slavery, and I started to examine reggae records that spoke to slavery. Again, so when I was invited to do this, I'm like, oh, okay, so I've looked at it from a slavery aspect, and dug out all the artists that I hadn't realized at the time what they were speaking at, you know, what they were speaking to. You do it retrospectively and you think, wow, and then you have an even deeper admiration for the artists when you learn what they were trying to convey to you. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, but that just, you know, I'm approaching this and present here just really to share my knowledge of, you know, I'm a sound system DJ, but in a sound system, this is not really where we focus. So on the other side, as I said, when I came up through the academic route, and you know, as you do, you know, in college, uni, whatever, you have deeper discussions about lyrics, etc. So yeah, thank you.
And I don't know, do any of you want to comment on anything that the other speakers have said, or build on?
I think I built on Alex's whilst I was speaking, so I did build on that. I think as we'll go on, I will pick up.
Okay, because I found Sumeet, what you were saying about how when sometimes, especially looking with the examples that you gave of nuclear weapons, that the people who are affected the most are indigenous communities. They are, basically not white. And also, Alex, you also brought in Bob Marley War, which in itself was also, I think it was a speech that Haile Selassie gave to the UN. Wouldn't you say that reggae artists were onto something?
Yeah,
especially given what we've seen, for example, with the conflict in Ukraine, where when that war broke out, and Europe responded by saying, okay, all Ukrainians, you can, we'll give you refuge. And then everyone else, they gave them, really, really short stays, a few months. And even before they could get to Europe, they were being told, you can't get on trains, you can't get on buses, because these are for Ukrainians only. And by Ukrainians only, it was a euphemism for white people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that reggae musicians, music of all sorts offers opportunities for songwriters or singers to make comments on what is going on in society. And those comments could be from, frivolous stuff of everyday life, that, how lovely the food is, or how wonderful the women are, or how terrible the weather is. I think what I've always loved about reggae is they focus on issues of justice and peace and love, and as Colin was bringing up, also his history and the past. Sort of always reminding us of the past, but also, as Peter Tosh would say, a man of the past living in the present, walking in the future. And so that continuity, like forcing us to reckon with non-European concepts of time. But to your point, the oppression and exclusion and abuse and all kinds of prejudices and discriminations Colin was talking about, until the color of a man's skin is no longer of any significance, like the color of one's eyes. That reggae musicians have for decades done this job of enlightening us. And so while some versions of reggae, like dancehall, doesn't necessarily focus on sort of this more lofty messages, but the history of reggae and its sort of relationship to Rastafari especially also points to, dignifies the African person, person of African descent, and points to our common humanity, points to the fact that we are all human and that we are all dignified and we all deserve respect. And I've found that as actually building on Colin's idea, for me, as a way of living, as a philosophy, as a way of navigating everyday life, as a refrain for even when there's a protest or something happens. I find song lyrics that helps me make sense of the thing that is happening. The song might have been sung back in 1969 or back in 1981, but I can still find relevance of those lyrics to help me navigate my everyday life. Also as a form of entertainment, I just find the music very beautiful in both in its simplicity and its complexity. Both are very delightful. If you think about redemption song. It's, you know, very rather an easy message, but speaks to lots of issues that are sort of brought up and brought to light. You mentioned the discriminatory practices for refugees. There are a couple of, there's a French band, they're based in France, Dub Inc. And they have one of their songs is refuge, like speaks to refugees and their journey from leaving, trying to find a home. There's a Sierra Leonean band that was is composed of people who are in a refugee camp together. I think it's called Refugee All Stars. I think they may have split, but their songs includes narrating their experiences in refugee camps and eating diets that are not their own. So there are multiple opportunities to learn, again, to me, to learn both about questions of peace and war, but peace really for me more broadly. So it's not just that we're building peace because we are not in war, but that people are respected, people are fed, people find meaning in life, sort of people feel empowered on the one hand, and on the other hand, condemning war, condemning the flagrant uses of human resources to pursue the interests of politicians. I think Buju Banton recently produced a song that talking about selling off everything in Jamaica. Sell off, I think it's the title of the song or something like that, and narrates the selling off of public properties, things that were held in public trust, and being given to people who have, for simple favors, and partly depending on who you know and whether you have access to power. So sort of critiquing the system as well. And so for me, it's a very, and then lastly, actually, also Colin brought up Jimmy Cliff. I've used Treat the Youths Right, the song about youth, to teach my introduction to sociology class, to talk about youth culture, but also talk about the ways that songs can be used to convey messages that are very straightforward. And they play the song and they find it both entertaining, but then we have to decode the lyrics and look at what is it like, you know, oh, you'll be looking for dynamite if you don't treat the youth right. So you're being they're highlighting the fact that there's might be injustice and you need justice, but also telling you it's not that you're gonna get away with it if you just keep oppressing us. It's not okay we're not just gonna turn the other cheek in a sense. We're gonna stand up for our rights. You know, both Peter Tosh and Bob Marley, get up, stand up for your rights. That's also a song that you hear in a lot of protests movements around the world. So that's the other component that, you know, and that's, to me, is very telling, you know, coming from Jamaica, a little island with very few people, and spreading all over the world, that indigenous people in different parts of the world now find relevance and resonance with reggae. Black people all over Africa find resonance with reggae. People in Asia find resonance with reggae. In Japan, there's a lot of reggae in Japan. So just thinking, I was told there's a lot of reggae in Finland. You know, I've presented at a conference and somebody's telling me about, oh, you should listen to Finnish reggae, and except I don't understand the Finnish language. But otherwise, there are multiple opportunities, both for study, for inspiration, for entertainment, and the like. So I'll stop there for now.
I'd just like to, of course, build on Colin and Alex, what you're saying, and just thinking about, like, one, the song War, and the speech. I mean, he talks about human rights specifically. How human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race. And it comes up in this paper I wrote about the relationship between nuclear war and reggae. But just another thing that really resonated with me, Alex, when you were speaking, was about how, like, reggae music also provides a way of looking into time from a, like, non-Western point of view. In Redemption Song, he says, again, related to nuclear war, have no fear for atomic energy, because none of them could stop the time. And it's this feeling that, especially in times where the world seems to be in a really bad place and there are a lot of difficult problems to solve, that thinking about the timelessness of what is right and what is wrong. And I think that comes through in the Bob Marley War song too, is something that is personally very meaningful to me, because it helps keep head above water in a very difficult time. And it seems like it has resonated with like a lot of people across the world. Like in Vermont too, I'll throw that in there, since right, like my introduction, I grew up in New York, and came to become familiar with reggae music to New York, but really learned about like the history and the background in this place that is quite far from New York, and where I wouldn't have expected it particularly. But and then another point is, right, so since then, like, I think the timelessness extends over time, and like two other songs that have been like particularly resonant to me, being from New York City, are two songs Steel Pulse put together, Taxi Driver and Don't Shoot. And Taxi Driver is from a song from the 90s, and it's about right, it's about how people in New York City, or people of color, Black people mainly, are unable to get taxis, or at the time before Uber and Lyft, people just wouldn't stop because of racism. And then Don't Shoot was about right, Trayvon Martin's words when he was stopped, and then the chorus goes on, and it talks about he says, "I can't breathe," and those are the words that Eric Garner used in New York City when he was put under a chokehold and murdered by a police officer in New York City. And right, Steel Pulse isn't I don't think they live in New York. I think they're from the UK. Well, they are from the UK, and but just the fact that someone from somewhere that's not my city completely understands the issue and the thinking around injustice, and why like one small incident reflects an injustice the same way as it would in Vietnam, to call on your point, and or different places in the world. It's something really special. And again, Colin, to your point, I feel like this discussion today has brought me back to a place where really listening to what people are saying in reggae songs and reggae music. It's like a unique place that we have where these ideas are carried over time. So thank you.
Yes, Sumet. Have I pronounced your name right? Sumet. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you for that paper, because it's your paper that was sent out, wasn't it, to us? Is that correct, Ambrose? You sent Sumet's paper.
So there are two links. One
Yeah.
is to Sume's paper, and the other one is to the one Alex wrote.
Yeah. So, well, both of them. Just reading them and exposing me again. Because I'm not familiar with all the works that you guys have highlighted, but I need you've given me some homework, which I'm looking forward to, because these are artists that I've admired, and it's quite often, and the way we normally do it is you're in your friendship group or whatever, and your friend will say, "Oh, have a listen to this. I found this interesting," and that's how we generally get to, or a radio presenter, you'll be listening to a radio show. So what's happened with this particular forum here is these papers have been sent out, and I've seen I've read the papers, and then I've seen where we were talking about the cover art and stuff. So that's when I sort of went and looked at Mikey Dread's album and saw, oh yeah, he's World War III, and he's got all these tanks and all of that on there. And so you've actually put me down another path in terms of looking back at this material, back at these artists, and even helping me to discover works of artists that I know the artists, but I'm not familiar with those particular pieces. So I you know, yeah, I'm really grateful. I see Kwaku's in the room, just a bit distracted. Yeah, so I'm really grateful for this forum and forums like this where we do study, and some you were saying this place that reggae enables us to go, and all this body, you know, once you're people help you navigate and find these bits, you'll be surprised how much, and these guys have been, I don't know, sitting out, you know, on a tree stump somewhere or whatever, and just thinking about the world. I mean, why in is it Redemption Song? Why did Bob Marley talk about atomic energy? You see, you just mentioned that, Sumit, and it just hit me there because I've listened to it so many times, and yes, that word that it's speaking about atomic energy is in there, but why? These guys have got it's almost as if they've got the world on their shoulders. You know, these artists, it's like they're carrying the burden of the world, you know, and they got this stuff that they need to get out. It's just, it really is fascinating. And I'm, you know, what I'm loving about this is I'm getting excited to go and go back and listen some more to some of these works, and just and take in the deeper meaning of some of what I've been listening to. And I'm sure other people that you know, where you're you know, that listen to watch this broadcast later on will start to analyze the works in more. But I think, you know, thank you for putting this together, and hopefully there'll be more discussions like this around artist work. And as I said, I got turned on to looking into lyrics and seeing this. I guess I'm one of the, I consider myself to be one of these woke people, sort of woken up after the George Floyd incident, to be quite frank, and started to examine things, starting to look at the deeper meaning of things. I kind of feel like I was walking, I mean, I've always been a conscious person, and look, but I've gone even deeper since the George Floyd thing, and started to, as I said, with the slavery thing, I started, you know, starting to look at the how much reggae spoke to slavery issues and that type of thing. And this again will give me another avenue to go and look down and look at war and how we live together. Cause you both, I think everyone's mentioned it, you know, reggae is about truth and rights, peace, and all that type of thing. So when we are turned on to specific artists and we're showing some deeper meaning, and you know, it's interesting that certain things go over your head, and it's not until you examine it in this context. Bob Marley talking about atomic energy. Have no fear for atomic energy. It's a powerful statement. Have no fear for atomic energy. Wow. You know, as you bring out these, and these are little phrases and little words that stick with me. And you know, Alex, you said we carry. I kind of live by these. You mentioned about living, and I just thought to myself, actually, that is these records have formed how, you know, some people live their lives according to the Bible, and how the Bible shapes and guides them. I guess with culture music, the culture side of the reggae, and that has helped shape me and how I behave and how I interact with other people. I think that's what I take from it, the good side, all the good bits out of it, and just say, well, yeah, I'm being given information on how to conduct myself with others, and how to conduct myself in this world. You know, I wouldn't say I'm a Christian, but you know, I went to church when I was growing up, etc. I occasionally attend church, but really for me, I'll never forget one Christmas, me and my friends. So we were going back into the 80s. We used to listen to a lot of dancehall music, or it was, you know, it was rubber dub those times, not the kind of slackness. Well, there was slackness because it was the Yellow Man time, but going back to the Yellow Man, early 80s. and there was culture versus slackness. And me and my friendship group, we were sort of into the culture side of reggae. So the MCs that used to chat about culture, Brigadier Jerry and those sorts of people, we would listen to those. We would draw more to those lyrics rather than the slack side of things that, talked about lewd acts and whatever. I remember one of the things we used to do was go to midnight mass. And we said, and because we were heavily into listening to these tapes that were coming from Jamaica, and then we went to midnight mass, and then we came out of church. So this is about 12:30 in the morning, a Christmas day. So we said, who did you pray to? Because prior to that, it would be God. And we all said, we said, Jah. Because we were in a Church of England, and we said we prayed to Jah because we've got this mindset now, because our sort of Bible was what was coming out of these dance halls. These people were like our spiritual leaders, Brigadier Jerry, and they were teaching us how to behave, how to conduct ourselves in the world, and that's how we wanted to conduct ourselves, as good citizens, so we were getting, so it just, sorry, I'm reminiscing and whatever, but that's what the power of music for me, taking in the words. And with these cultural DJs, they literally they told you would find out about things that were happening in the world, I think sometimes sooner than where newspapers or the media may well ignore certain things. These guys were bringing them to the fore, or examining them in their way, and getting us in turn to listen. And in a dancehall setting, it's not an easy setting. So unless you're good at your storytelling and you're telling something good, you literally got instant reaction from the crowd, and you were asked to repeat those lyrics. Because we were into our lyrics. So if someone had strung together a really good set of lyrics that inspired us or whatever, they had to they couldn't say it once. They had to rewind and come again. So the whole as I said, there were two sides. You were either wanting to hear the slackness side of reggae, or you wanted to hear the culture side. And me and my friendship group, we were really into the culture side of things, and getting edified and getting inspiration, and how to basically as when you go to college or whatever, you're trying to find your identity. And certainly I was for a long time trying to find my identity in this world. Because of the racism in the UK. Then you go to Jamaica and whatever, and they say, well, you're English boy. So we thought we were Jamaican. No, you're not. You're English. The English don't want us, and Jamaicans don't want us. So for a long time, we were in this no man's land. A lot of us that were born here in the United Kingdom, always looking for guidance, always. And a lot of our guidance came through the music.
So we're going to do a few things. What we're going to do first is I'll say a few words about how this event actually came together. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go to Kwaku, and then we'll go to questions from those who are present. So if you're listening and you've got questions, please put them in the chat. We'll come back to them shortly. So, when just before putting this event together, I became convinced that we were on the verge of a nuclear war. I was strongly convinced that nuclear warfare, that nuclear weapons were going to be used, that it was imminent. And the only way I could, regain that calm was by looking for music that spoke, that was that resisted, opposed the use of nuclear weapons. And I was familiar with folk, and also mainly folk, that mainly when people think of peace songs, they're associated with folk music. And yet, at the same time, we know that reggae artists have a really, really, broad range of songs that are anti-war, that are also anti-nuclear warfare. So, and then I read your paper, Sumeet, and from there I read Alex, and I also read, a few other papers that were all saying the same thing, that actually, look, there's a really, really strong component in reggae that is concerned with peace, with anti-warfare, with alternative ways of solving disputes. And at the same time, like what you pointed out, Alex, that actually, even in that war and peace discourse, there's also other issues, like issues around justice and injustice and what to do about those. So it doesn't present like a simple linear narrative about what is war, what is peace, but yeah, it presents a complicated one. So this is just, for me and how this event came together. And thank you for agreeing to take part in the conversation. So without more from me, maybe Kwaku, if you could introduce yourself and then just, talk about.
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
We hear you fine.
Okay, fantastic, because I've had a stressful evening. I did WhatsApp Colin to give my apologies, because 5 minutes to I was in the throes of some technical issues. So I'm just glad I made it. So my mind is really not settled, because obviously it's very upsetting to agree to do a thing and I couldn't be on time. So my mind is all over the place. So I'm glad Colin spoke for quite a while. I didn't mind feeling like a passenger. I think he did say that maybe we're open for questions. I think I'm more likely to respond to the questions, because I'm sure whatever I'm about to say would have been said. So I'm quite happy to respond to questions. But he did say something that I probably want to respond to, that reggae is a broad church in terms of what they cover. So it's never been one. And today, people, for example, I'm deviating slightly just to make the point. People would reference Bob Marley, One Love, Redemption Song, all those nice songs. But they started doing what you call rude boy songs, Rudy songs, and stuff like that. So sometimes we have to see these artists as more than one dimensional. Of course, there's I heard, I think, Colin talking about the slackness thing. There's always been that yin-yang thing with reggae music, whether it's spiritual or secular, whether it's hardcore or the ones for the nice ones for the lovers, it's always been there. And maybe I'll give you this anecdote. I like sharing it. Luciano, for example, is one of the key roots conscious artists. But I interviewed him some years ago, and he said when he started, he started in the 90s, slackness was what was happening, Shabba and all these people, and he just followed the trend. People would not know that, but that was what he was doing. It wasn't until maybe people like Arnold Silk showed that there was another way of doing conscious music and having a profile that he changed. So the point I'm trying to make is that some of these artists, whether it's Bob Marley or whatever, they've been through different styles of music that probably they're not so well known, except if you're an anorak, you check and say, oh, but look at what he's singing. But anyway, I think I'll throw that in then. I'm happy to maybe to respond to the Q&A.
Maybe before we even go there, your thoughts on reggae anti-war songs, reggae anti-nuclear warfare songs.
It's interesting because I just wrote something on the chap that died called Noel McCoy. Noel McCoy is known mostly for being an R&B singer. To me, he's one of our best soul singers. But he started off in a school band, which was reggae, as most African Caribbeans do. Reggae is their first calling for most, and then they end up doing gospel or wherever. And so, although we know Norma Cole as an R&B singer, one of the first songs he did, and I've forgotten the title, was strictly roots and culture, where it's talking about Jah, and it's talking about how we have to sort out the world, which is going mad and stuff like that. And that's very typical of roots and culture, always sort of like telling us about the world and what we've got to do to love each other or to put the world right. That is the, what should I say, the blueprint on which a lot of roots and culture music is done. So I just thrown in Norma Cole to say Norma Cole is not a typical reggae artist, but when he started, this was what he was doing. And a lot of, so typically roots and culture people talk about reality. Reality is whether things are good for us or things are bad. Often they come in from the ghetto, so it's about the negative thing that they think about, the hardships of life, but they don't dwell on it. I'm just thinking of someone like Brown. What's his name? My head's gone. Please excuse me because I've really gone through some stressful. Dennis Brown. Dennis Brown sing one of the sweetest love songs. The next time he can go onto a spiritual tip. Next time he can talk about Babylon or wherever. The only thing is that his dulcet tones belie the gravity of what he's thinking about, because it's got a sweet song, so a sweet voice. And I'll just throw this in because I never thought of it that way. Last week I was talking to someone and Chronic's name cropped up and said, oh, people don't like Chronic's because they think his voice is too sweet or it's like a girl. I said, I never thought of that. I'm listening to what he's saying. That is what matters to me. What does it matter whether his voice sounds this or this? It's what he's thinking. And I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyway, I just thought I'll throw it there. But yeah, Dennis, I'm saying that he's got a dulcet tone that sometimes belies the gravity of what he's saying. You really have to listen, because 1 minute he can be charming in a romantic way, and that same voice can be shielding us. That same voice can be bringing down Babylon. I think that's what I can contribute at the moment.
And also, just before you came, the other speakers gave almost like an overview of how they first came to reggae. Maybe you could also do the same, and then
absolutely, I love doing that, because I think it was last year, Colin and I do something called International Reggae Day, and Trojan got me to do a playlist, and I took it back because I was born in England, but I come from Ghana. So my childhood, I was in Ghana. So in the 60s, the reggae we were hearing, well, it wasn't really reggae, rocksteady, and the person who we knew was Johnny Nash. And I have to say that I wasn't very well disposed to reggae when I came. I thought it was crude and blah, 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 blah. Of course, there are, in the 70s, Trojan threw out a lot of stuff that came on Radio 1. So Radio 1 was the pop radio. So maybe I was hearing the pop end, but there was another end that was for the hardcore people. That was in the clubs. But to be honest, in regards to the conversation we have in here, I would say in the 1970s, mixed 70s, and certainly the imagine that 77 culture brought 7 times 7, whatever that's. And there was a record shop I live in a bar in London called Brent. And this record shop was called Gangsterville. In fact, that's where Aswa started rehearsing from, in one of the back rooms in Gangsterville. So I'll see things like culture about the album. When the two, you know, I have to put that out there. My mind is on very, very on
2/7 Clash.
2/7 Clash. Yeah. So we got that. We got what's his name? This guy on Ireland who does a lot of Marcus Garvey. My mind really isn't Benny Spear. So those were my first interaction with reggae. Then I ended up working at the warehouse for CBS. CBS distributed Virgin. So, and we used to buy the albums for £1. I think in those days you bought it £3 in the shop, and we got it £1. So I didn't have to listen to it. Of course, you didn't even have the chance to listen to it. Remember, in the 70s, Virgin went to Jamaica and signed almost every artist they could. Gladiators, I can't even name them, so many. So for £1, I just bought the albums. And one thing in those days was I had the luxury of time. You could listen to the albums, the tracks, and listen over and over again. Today, I listen to a record probably once, I write about it, and I never get the chance to listen to it. So I'll say I'm a very 70s person in terms of my engagement with reggae. And I was an albums person. I thought it made sense to buy albums. So I never really got into singles. So I got albums and I'll listen to them. For example, one of my favorite albums is the first album, Aswa. But my favorite track is not the singles or what people know, is Back to Africa, which was never released as a single. Because you listen, Concrete Jungle, you listen to the albums side A, side B, and as I said, I had the luxury of time in the sense that I could revisit albums. Today, I don't have that luxury. So my engagement was in mid to late 70s, and having worked in Virgin and but all these albums, that was great.
Thank you. And we've got a question from where are my questions? We've got one question. I think it was from Chris. Do you want to ask your question, Chris? Chris is asking. Yeah, carry on.
My mistake. So how would you compare reggae from the United States compared to reggae in the United Kingdom?
Is it to any of us?
I think this is for Sumeet.
I'm not sure it is. Considering I just feel like Colin and Kwaku and so many folks here have a lot of knowledge on like the entire genre. But I don't know. I as a Steel Pulse fan, and as I don't know if there is that large of a distinction, as much as, and I think that's one of the best parts of reggae, is that the theme is essentially surrounds like oppression and struggle of people who are disenfranchised and not empowered in different places in the world, and that's something that I've appreciated. Overall, I do think that I'm not as familiar with the current state of reggae in the United Kingdom, but like you've seen reggae in the United States, like where I went to school in Vermont, it affecting people from different cultures. I think there's like Modest Yahoo, who was an Orthodox Jewish, formerly Orthodox Jewish artist who spoke about Israel and Israel and Palestine in his songs, and maybe the United States in the sort of context and it being like basically a country of immigrants, reggae music resonating to different groups of immigrants. My family's from India, it resonated with my father a lot growing up, and I think that's where it came from me. So I would say that like universal aspect extends here, but really curious to hear from the folks in the UK on and if I'm totally wrong. So yeah.
But before we go to Colin, Alex, and Kwaku, Chris, how would you answer your own question?
I would have to say that reggae in the United States talks more about conflict that is going on in the United States, while reggae in the United Kingdom talks about how can I explain this? How it talks about situations in general, issues in general.
Do you have examples of some reggae songs, reggae artists who do these kinds of things? That
not in my head, but I remember one reggae song that was talking about crime in New York. How race. I'm pretty sure the person's name was Skip Marley. He's the grandson of Bob Marley. He talks about how racism in the United States has affected people, how there's like this division against people. There's like this division where there's like people are getting their rights taken away because of their religion, their race, their gender. And this is one example that I have found.
And this is going to be my final question for you, Chris. I feel like one of those talk show hosts. Yeah. This is my own question for you, Chris. What are your thoughts on reggae anti-war or reggae peace songs?
Well, that's a question because I actually found it pretty unique. I am learning reggae classes in college right now, and they have talked about reggae in Jamaica itself, and I'm surprised to know that reggae is not only talking about the conflicts in Jamaica, but it is in general. And reggae, and it shows like how influential reggae has become, which is even showing influence in Japan, for instance. And reggae music has shown people that how we should not be against each other, how we should not turn the faith of evil, if you don't understand what I'm trying to explain. But I found that through reggae music, talking about human rights, talking about the conflicts, I feel like it is important. It is important for us to understand these things, because these are things that are affecting us right now.
Yeah. And we go back to you, panelists. Are there differences, would you say, between reggae, not just reggae in the UK, reggae in the US, but reggae generally, as it manifests itself around the world?
Well, I mean, I do a global reggae show on Friday, so I play music from all around, reggae music from all around the world. And one thing I've discovered is that it does, from around the world, everyone will look at their own situation and use reggae as a vehicle to talk about their own personal social issues or whatever. So in terms of messages, I think it's doing the same all around the world. People find reggae as the vehicle that they will talk about their own social issues. The difference I find, if you want to talk about difference, is just really, I think, and this is what we found from the early days when reggae started to be artists from, or people that were born in the UK, or people that came to live here in the UK. We put our own UK spin on it, and I think from a sound perspective, that's the only difference. So you've got in the States, you've got the Cali scene. So the people in California, they've got their, I know a number of the artists around there, Stick Figure and all sorts of artists and that. They've got their California sound. And it's all about the influences in the UK. we have a melting pot of different musics. You know, I grew up listening to, you know, glam rock and all sorts of things, and all of that. You know, I think we're actually very fortunate in the UK to have all this different forms of music coming at us wherever we go. So some of that gets spun into, if we create music, when we create music here in the UK, there's a little UK twist on it. One of the things that came out was Lovers Rock, and that's down to our influences here. And a lot of Jamaicans thought we weren't playing it right back then. But no, I think it's understood now that we put our own twist on it. So we were getting crucified by the Jamaicans back in the day for perhaps not playing it right. But I don't think they understood that each region is going to put its own twist on it. And it's beautiful to hear sort of Japanese reggae now, because it's evolved. Lovers Rock, Japanese Lovers Rock, it sounds completely different to our Lovers Rock, but it's their twist. It's their, you know, whatever instruments are played in Japan or wherever around the world, they get thrown into the music. So I think in terms of messages, I don't think there's much difference. So people will talk about the world and will talk about their own unique social issues and whatever. But from a sounds perspective, you'll use, I mean, we're all going to use, draw from our own personal experience or whatever music our parents we were influenced in the home or whatever, that will somehow feed into our music in some way. Obviously the main sound is reggae, but you'll notice the little differences that they're put in it, the little twists that are put in there, and that's beautiful because, you know, reggae's one of the things with reggae, it never stands still. It's constantly evolving. The artists have been experimenting from Jamaica. They constantly experimenting. I love that about reggae, the constant experimentation. And, you know, I think it's people sort of outside of Jamaica that have more issues and try to put you can't do this and rules around it. But in Jamaica, they just evolved, you know, you know, try this. There's a bottle in the yard. Let's bang that on the microphone and see what sound that makes. You know, you know, they were just experimenting. It's constant experimentation. That's what I loved about it.
Thank you. How about Alex, Sumeet, and Kwaku?
Yeah, the only quick point I could make with reference to two bands in the US, which actually speaks to Colin's point, is a band, Groundation, and their style is particular and unique too. I can't even compare them with any other American band. And then the other one is Midnight. Midnight's work is also particular and very unique and really speaks to the evolution of sounds and how people, their interests, their sort of styles and what's available, influences what they're going to talk about and how they're going to talk about it and what kind of rendition they're going to impose on it.
Sumeet and Kwaku?
Yeah, I want to rather take in a different way because I have to admit I'm not on top of American reggae. I think there was a band called Bad Brains. They were rock and they had a whole lot of fusion, and I think reggae was part of it, but they were a very lively band. But I wanted just to make a point. The first port of call for reggae was Britain. So if there's a mature reggae in terms of what they call international, that would be in the UK. Those in the UK had a closer relationship with Jamaica. Yeah, there were African Caribbeans in America, but I don't think it was the same vibe. But this is another point I want to make because he's talking about America. Ska started in the 60s. In the 70s, the British, often they were European or multiracial bands. The Specials, Madness, picked up on ska. Madness, in fact, is the title I have to say my head isn't there. Anyway, now in the 80s and 90s, the Americans discovered ska. And what surprised me was that they thought ska came from what the British were doing in the 70s. So they did not go back far down the lineage to find out that it came from Jamaica. And they thought the specials, the madness, mostly European bands or mixed race bands that were in the UK were the inventors of ska. So I'm very much interested in history. So this was something that resonated with me, that we've got to be very mindful of where we think the music comes from. So there they were giving kudos to all these bands. When the British bands, just like when R&B started, they gave homage to the African Americans. The British bands in the 70s covered You Much Too Young. All these things are reggae songs that the specials and other people covered, and they give respect to the source, which was Jamaica. But these Americans in the 80s and 90s, when they started doing their stuff, thought, oh, it was from Britain. I'm just throwing that in. I don't know why. I just feel like throwing that in.
And Sumeet has had to leave because he's, we were talking to him during his break. He's gone for a work meeting. So maybe another thing that happens with reggae artists is that I get the sense that they are almost like your modern day griots, where they are teaching histories, values, approaches, framings, ways of moving, ways of being that people listening to their music would not get anywhere else. For example, here in the UK, we've got real issues around how history is taught, where some groups are not their histories are not talked about. Same as well with issues around like what we are talking about, war and peace, where the people who are given the platform will tend to be those who espouse conservative values, but not only that, they also tend to be people who are of a certain class, and everyone else is ignored or marginalized. And yet you've got these artists who are actually bringing in these narratives and saying, actually, this is important. We need to talk about this. And if you will not talk about it using mass media, using your newspapers, using your TVs, we will talk about them using our music. So maybe we in your summation, I don't know how we do it, but maybe we have end notes from the three of you before the event closes. Final comments, observations.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on your point about maybe politicians not using the media or not enlightening the people about certain situations. I think Alex mentioned it as well, that I can't remember if you said it was banned in the country of Africa. Was it Kenya you said?
Yeah, Kenya. Yeah,
Kenya. Yeah, so it's actually a Kenyan artist that always contacts me. A modern day Kenyan, a reggae artist. Yeah, and again, it was the same with Jamaica. The music and the artists are saying what the politicians. So the people are gravitating to the music because the artists are saying and telling you about what's happening, where and may well offer solutions, mainly just critique, but why won't the politicians speak to what's happening or try to resolve? So, you know, you go to the artists in almost like a real time. The thing with dancehall, and I don't mean sort of the modern dancehall, is when we were listening to our culture DJs who were, you know, quite popular back in the 80s. So they would be speaking to issues live in real time. So we were interested in getting those cassette tapes. So those people I would follow, and they were like is priest too strong a word? But I was getting my teachings, my learnings from these dance halls, these guys that were speaking about culture and talking about social issues and passing them on to us, and you weren't hearing, you know, they would be very critical of the government, and I can understand what Alex is saying. You want to shut that down, that alternative view, and that's why a lot of politicians don't like Twitter and whatever, because individuals can get their message out. So back in the day, the way alternative messages, alternative narratives could get out was via, you know, the reggae music channel.
And before we even close, you know, is it possible for us to talk about reggae peace songs, reggae anti-war songs, without talking about the One Love concert? Was it 1978? Bob Marley, almost civil war in Jamaica, brings politicians together. There's that concert. I don't know.
I think that was
Any thoughts?
a very powerful statement then. I mean, really, that's an endorsement of reggae in itself, and the roles that a musician can play. I mean, now you've got a musician in the lead, you know, with the leader of the opposition and the prime minister. I mean, that's an incredible. You can't leave that out. That's a very powerful thing to have happened. I remember, I think, again, like yourself, Kwaku, we get the chronology right. Bob Marley had been shot. Correct me if I'm right. He had been that's after he'd been shot. The peace concert.
Yeah.
So imagine, so now someone that has been shot by, you know, what they consider, by someone who was supporting a party that wasn't his, or that he wasn't affiliated with, or whatever, but he wanted to bring the two together. This is rubbish. Why are we shooting each other? It's a very powerful thing. Thank you for bringing that up, because that just adds to the weight. I mean, and you know what, people from around the world look at those things, and how and I think other artists have, I don't think they've had anything as powerful from that around the world. I mean, in different countries have had they've either helped in a political campaign or whatever, but I don't think I can recall any artists that try to bring two parties together. I mean, that's very symbolic. It's a very symbolic and a very powerful thing to do. And those things, as you know, go all around the world. But imagine when Bob Marley died, that was shown on British news, that was on our news outlets. He's just a reggae musician from Jamaica, a little island in the sun, and that's a major news item. Wow.
Right. I'm sure you mentioned Vietnam. I'm sure that must, because that was a pop hit by Jimmy Cliff.
Yes, that was my first recollection.
Right. Yeah, because obviously it's not always that we get these songs, like a British song like Vietnam being a pop hit, but that certainly was. So that was a bit unusual.
Yeah, but as I said, when I was probably 9 when it came out, we were playing it, and I didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand what it was about. I knew it was it had a great hook, yes, and we were singing it. And it's not until years later, going to college or whatever, then learning about the lyrics later in life, and then thinking, wow, the Vietnam War. You know, a Jamaican singing about the Vietnam War. You know, because as we were talking about, most of it's mainly the Americans singing those types of songs, maybe James Brown or whatever, or Curtis Mayfield singing about war and whatever. But, you know, for me, it's later on off looking back and then seeing that reggae artists were actually speaking to these things as well. Amazing.
Right, but people like Jimmy Cliff obviously were not just stuck in Jamaica. A lot of these artists ended up in the UK for substantial amounts of time and getting the vibe of the UK. And he was here in the 60s. Remember, the 60s was flower power, hippiedom, and all that kind of stuff. So they'll be imbibing it directly, not secondhand, maybe in the Caribbean. So that must have an impact. And also, we've got to be mindful. Sometimes we try to put Jamaican artists in a box like that. All they can do is reggae or this, and they some of them feel like it holds them back because they say they're musicians or songwriters and they're capable of writing any type of song and in any style. And someone like Jim Cliff, that album, Another Cycle, people don't like it. I like it. To most people, it's not straight up reggae. I think he recorded in Brazil. But to me, I'm looking at the song, the quality of the songs, but people were wedded to, if you're a reggae artist, you're supposed to sound this way. Only few artists can break out of that mold. The other thing that I probably have to add to this discussion is that we should not talk of music in isolation to the culture, because to me, there's been a lot of Rasta influence. So a Jamaican artist does not have to, or a reggae artist does not have to be a Rasta, but there's no doubt that the ethos around reggae is very much championed and pioneered by the ethos of Rastafarism. One love, peace, that comes from Rasta, and that is sort of crossed over into the general milieu of reggae. So we cannot talk about reggae like it's music, and then the culture, the people around it in isolation. One love, that comes from Marcus Garvey and stuff, and you know a lot of roots and culture. Reggae artists are very much into Marcus Garvey. Yeah. So coming back to the point,
sorry, Kwaku. I'm conscious that Alex might need to leave, so
okay,
maybe
please.
we have concluding remarks from him,
absolutely.
and then we come back.
No problem at all.
Alex.
Well, it's been a delight spending the part of the afternoon here. I know it's the evening over in the UK with you and exploring questions of reggae, the evolution of reggae, the role of reggae, especially the questions of peace and war and in reggae and the various styles. And it's especially delightful to hear the stories about how we came upon reggae as youngsters, how we were influenced by either parents, the societies, the media that was available. I want to end by bringing it back to the UK. So one of the songs of, I guess the lyrics of Linton Kwesi Johnson's License to Kill, where he implores everyone. You can ask John Major about the license to kill. You can ask anyone, and kind of brings up this larger issue of justice and police justice, accountability, and victimization on the one hand. And then you'd mentioned Chronics, and so I want to end with Chronics' Modern Warfare, one of his songs around modern warfare, where it sort of points out the natures of tribal wars in different parts of the world. Syria. So he highlights the different spaces, which also speaks to Kwaku's idea that Jamaicans they're not limited to Jamaica. They are also exploring issues around the world. And like all of us, we are, Kwaku, whether you were born in the UK and then moved to Africa and then back to the UK, and those flows are always influencing us. But suddenly, I think that reggae as a vehicle, Colin, you're talking about it as a vehicle, is a wonderful vehicle for exploring consciousness, religion, social change, social struggles, and most of all, to me, the possibility of human rights, given that we are commemorating human rights and justice for all, regardless of their race, regardless of one's class status, regardless of one's nation of origin, that we all have a right to be respected and to be treated fairly. And so with that, I really do need to go, but it's been an honor and a pleasure to be part of the conversation today. And thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please, may I say something?
Yes.
Hi. So I'm a white woman, and it's wonderful to be in minority and listening to you talking about something that you guys know so much about. I just wanted to say that it's been such a pleasure, because a little bit kind of my story, I'm 56, so I, grew up in 70s and 80s, North London, Kentish Town. But before that, I was born in Niger. No, not born, sorry. I was conceived in the Sahara Desert in Niger. So I kind of, I count myself as an honorary African. And I grew up, so the first singles, I remember the problem with not breaking the needle on the record player and being really, really careful. When my mum and dad's, they'd lived in Ghana and different places in Africa. My dad had worked all over Africa, helping local builders learn to build with local materials. So I was brought up in a really kind of social justice environment and family. And but he brought a lot of Africa home with him. And that combined also with the singles that I used to not be allowed to play, but play when he wasn't in, was the 1960s proper ska, the old ska, King of Kings, and I can hear it now all scratchy. And I just, that's, if I have to have music on now, if I ever get to my own choice of music, because I have kids, then it's ska that goes on, but the old ska. And then obviously 1970s and 80s London, I went to school in the same school as Madness. So they were like 5th year and I was 1st year, so they were pretty much heroes of ours as well. And then me and my sister would be down Oxford Street, down the black clubs like Gossips, down back in the day, and just loved it. We never ever went to like white nightclubs. We just used to go and just for the dancing. It wasn't for anything else, just the dancing and the music. And then as I got older, my mum moved from being she was a feminist activist and academic, but she moved into the feminist and academic world of peace and militarism, anti-militarism, and she set up a thing called Women in Black in London. So she also sang and wrote songs in a political street choir. So a lot of her songs were about war, anti-war, peace. She wrote one called Arms Trader. And there's a take again, it's kind of all circular, isn't it? It comes back to there's a verse in there about Angola. And then also she wrote one called, and again, this is kind of coming back to the whole one love thing. She wrote a round, it's a sung in a round. It's not reggae at all, but the lyrics are one song, one dance, one world, one chance. And that always reminded me of it. It always made me think of Bob Marley. I don't know why, but he was such a hero in terms of me. I'm not deep into reggae, but I absolutely love the whole Bob Marley, Jimmy Cliff stuff. And so I just wanted to say that's, so many things have touched my history tonight. I really, really appreciate, listening to you guys. So thank you.
And before you go, your own thoughts on reggae, anti-war, anti-peace. Anti-war and peace songs, and also what was the name? What was your mom's name, and also the name of the choir?
So my mum's name was Cynthia Coburn. Coburn spelt like the drink, COCKBURN. She died 3 years ago, but there's a website out there that my sister looks after with her stuff, and it might even have Arms Trader on it. Her website was called No to War. I think it was kind of like a strap line for her website. It was more of a kind of, she just dumped a lot of stuff on there in case people wanted to access it. But I know her songs were on there because she kind of really prided herself in not just being an academic, a serious kind of academic, which she was a doctor and a professor, but never did a degree. But also being an activist. So she was working in Bosnia Herzegovina, researching in a refuge, but then she would be down Trafalgar Square with a bucket collecting for them as well. And the Women in Black, sorry, no, it was the choir is called Raised Voices in North London. And yeah, then they would just sing street corners and demos and stuff. What was the first question about reggae? And
just before we go there, I think I know Raised Voices. They came to Leicester a few years back for the Street Choirs Festival.
You're in Leicester?
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely beautiful.
I live in Rutland.
Oh,
right,
so
down the road.
You're a neighbor, aren't you?
Yeah, and my daughter goes to school in Evington because she goes to a special school. So my mum's choir, yes. Didn't you host the Street Choir Festival?
We did, yeah.
Yes, and I
Absolutely
remember
beautiful.
her coming. She was hello. I'm saying hello. I finally managed to sit down. Yeah, so that yes, they would have been at the Leicester one, and they. I can't remember if that's the one where they chose to sing, because they always have one song, don't they? That the whole choir, the whole festival learns, and they sing it at the end.
Yeah.
And one year, I don't know if it was the Leicester one. It might have been one in Leeds where they did one song, one dance, one world, one chance. 3,000 people singing it.
They did the internationally, but I'll look for the one that you mentioned. Yeah.
She wrote a lot of lyrics to.
Yeah.
And she loved to use African songs. So my niece grew up singing Sikalele, Nkosi Sikalele and stuff. So yeah, it's kind of like circular, and Africa keeps coming back into my life. But then, also North London, Jamaican, Caribbean, influence as well. So I think the whole, the war, anti-war thing, the peace and war thing with reggae, for me, it keeps just coming back. And reggae is something that's never gone away. So I was brought up going on CND marches as a baby or as a kid, and listening to my mum and dad's old ska stuff. And so it doesn't surprise me that there is a theme going through. I didn't think there was a theme going through because I hadn't really thought about it. And when I saw this was coming on, I thought, hang on, there's so much there. My mum wrote peace songs and I love reggae. But having listened for the last couple of hours, it's just, there's so many more connections. I think the comment right at the end there about one love and the whole Rastafarian, which I am no expert, but I've kicked around with people, and the whole social justice thing, it's wrapped up in the music as well. And so it doesn't surprise me that this is a theme that 4 or 5 grown men have managed to talk about, and probably only scratch the surface for 2 hours. I think it's great. Yeah, somebody needs to do a PhD on this, I reckon.
Thank you. And then we go back to Colin and Kwaku. So maybe if we just give your concluding remarks. Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Claudia. That was amazing.
You're welcome.
So we go back to you, Colin and Kwaku. So maybe if you just give your concluding remarks.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
It just occurred to me, obviously, I wasn't privy to the conversations you had before, but since we're talking about war, if I look at reggae, the focus is not necessarily on the big wars, world war, that type of stuff, because they had a war that was rather more immediate. Most of them were coming from ghettos. Unlike here, there was no social security. So life was survival. So it's about talking about the system, and whether the governments are doing them bad, disenfranchising them, not giving them the basics. So I think the war, so I'm sure Max Romeo was not talking about a big war, was talking about war in Babylon, the situation which they were in, that the system, they've got these big people who are the government, the prime ministers and whatever, and it doesn't really trickle down. So the war that they were talking about was war of survival. I think that's how I can sort of encapsulate it. So that's what was immediate to them. It was about survival. In the UK, I mean, yeah, we've got police brutality and obviously not to the same scale as America, but it's nowhere near what people go through in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica. You can sign on and maybe be comfortable to some extent. That does not exist in Jamaica. So I think it was about survival, and of course, the police can be brutal there as well. So it's those type of things immediate to them, not some big thing like when we have CND, you have marches in Europe about the bomb and stuff. I don't think that was far removed from their lives. I think the war on reflection was the war about immediate lives.
But the issues around the big wars as well, they also come into it.
Of course,
Like,
I mean, they said they are multidimensional, but it just occurred to me that if we're looking at it from a social perspective, the immediacy was what was affecting them, survival.
And also just saying that, I thought, which are the big wars? Are these the wars that governments fight, or are these the wars that people fight?
No. So the wars that governments fight and stuff like that, and obviously, just mentioned CND in the 70s. What was preoccupying us was to stop the bomb and stuff like that. People will go on marches and people will sing about that. And I'm saying they, in the Caribbean, I'm sure they were much more distance from that. And it just occurred to me that I think a lot of the wars was about war of survival, and the people that are putting them down, whether it was the government, whether it was the police, and those were. So when you look at Babylon is supposed to be the bad state, and sometimes they say it's the West, but I think you can, within that construct, have people that down press them, as Peter Church would say, and that would include the police, their own skin color, but they oppress them. That will include the politicians that marginalize them and did not give them the service and the opportunities that they need. And I think they're also part of that Babylon. It's not just Europe and the West. That is Babylon.
Thank you, Kwaku. And Colin?
Yeah, I think reggae has given artists the opportunity to travel the world and to form a worldview. I think in Bob Marley's case, even before really becoming a big artist, working in America, trying to raise money to pursue his career, gave him another insight. I mean, in one of his songs, working on the night shift on a forklift, just telling you that, and I'm not in Jamaica at the moment, but I'm trying to raise money to follow my ambitions. So that again, and lots of Jamaicans go abroad to earn money, be it farming or whatever. So they go out and they experience other parts of the world. There's the farming program that they go to the States or wherever to earn money. So there is a worldview that they form either from work experience, going abroad to earn money, and you're on a 3-month or 6 months contract to go and farm somewhere, or Bob Marley went over and stayed with Bam or whatever and earn money there. And then once you get into the music, once you are touring, you do form worldviews. You sit down, you reason with various people, and people from different genres. You start hearing, and remember, we were aligned. We talk about social issues. We were aligned with the punks back in the day. So going back to the albums that I mentioned. So with as I said, I learned about Vietnam through Jimmy Cliff, and then again when with Burning Spear, singing about no more wars, and as I said, even with Mikey Dread on his third and his World War III album. I mean, there's no tanks in Jamaica, so we're obviously not talking about, well, there's no tanks. There are no these big tanks and explosions and whatever. So he's obviously talking, these are our world views. So I think I've been influenced. Most of, you know, I think in my early years, I was reggae was at the heart of me, and then I sort of was drifting towards Christianity, and then went you know, got sucked right back into reggae. And reggae's, you know, the root side of it, as I said, has helped steer me in a particular direction and conduct my life in a particular way. And because of the talking about peace, so a lot of what I got from the church in terms of, you know, what was in the Bible, because remember, a lot of what's in the Bible is actually sung about in songs. You know, Kwaku mentioned Dennis Brown a lot. Dennis Brown's lyrics are straight out of the Bible, so I was getting more of the same from the lyrics within reggae. It's about, you know, how to, you know, peace and love. So those messages resonate with me, and they resonate with lots of people. So whatever, I mean, even now when we're talking about the war in Ukraine, people are crying again for peace. Can we not? Why can't we have peace? And you can play certain reggae songs now, and the messages, no matter what war you're talking about, those messages are relevant to that particular war, that particular circumstance, wherever you are in the world. And lots of I like the way that Africa has adopted reggae. You know, you know, if we get back into it, people say, well, reggae is African, but that's not, you know, but you know, over an American sound, which is, you know, the R&B and all of that, you know, the serious side of music and whatever. It is reggae in Africa, and it's great to see the various African artists now becoming big on the world stage with reggae music. And again, speaking about peace, so certain African countries know about war, and those songs, some of those reggae songs do resonate with them, you know, in a strong way. And now they are writing their own experiences of war, peace, reconciliation in their own lyrics. So, you know, I think even Kwaku, you've played the great thing with International Reggae Day is we do play reggae from all around the world. And I'm sure, Kwaku, it was in one of the things where you showed, was it Poland, where reggae was in Poland in the 80s, or one of those countries, some of those countries that reggae's been, and there was a war situation. You showed us that that reggae band in Poland, or one of those countries, and you know, when they showed the guy stood in front of the tank or whatever in one of those oppressed countries, but reggae was, we didn't know that, you know, I certainly didn't know that in the 80s that, you know, reggae was in, you know, there were people that were really into reggae in some of those eastern countries as well. So, you know, that's been a revelation to me, and the revelation that they've picked that genre as the one that is the one that says, you know, is a vehicle that really can carry the message and you know, speak to the suffering or what they're experiencing, and how and it seems to be the only vehicle. I mean, you talked about folk music. I know of folk, but I'm not too familiar with that aspect of folk. But I'm always interested, you know, to see the different cultures that have embraced reggae and embraced it, firstly for that message. And I'm grateful for the UNESCO for recognizing reggae and making it. What is it in? What's the statement? What's it called? Kwaku.
Intangible cultural
Intangible.
heritage.
Yeah. That's it's well worthy, and I think when the submission was made, a lot of what we're saying here was wrapped up in I don't know, is it you bid or you submit your the Jamaican culture minister made that submission, and it was granted. What is it, about 3 years ago now? 3-4 years. Yeah. So really, just I'm just in, this event has really opened up my mind to look deeper into this, and as I said, really just thank you for inviting me on, and definitely want to look and do some more research into this.
And thank you also to you, Colin, also to Kwaku, Alex, and Sumeet. It feels like we've only just started the conversation, So I really appreciate that we've been able to have this as part of the Leicester Human Rights Arts and Film Festival, and I look forward to working with you again when we look at plans for next year's festival.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on that happy note, we will end the session today. The festival continues until the 10th of December. So everyone is welcome to join and attend. So, thank you.
Very
Just
much.
wanted to say, I've just found something called Stop the War, a Roots Reggae CD, calling for world peace, VA, whatever that means, One Love, and it's obviously a compilation, but it's got pictures of bombs being dropped. There's the camera. Yeah.
Okay.
So that looks spot on for this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thank you, and good night.
Good night. Bye.
Thank you.